Whoever is disappointing us now actually started disappointing us a long time ago. Because I believe that if you do have a calling for politics, you will not be absent in the most important debates of your time. I'm 37 years old. I believe that almost everybody that's in the National Assembly or will be in the National Assembly are people who would be older than I am. So my question to them is, during those periods, during those times, where were their voices? Where were their voices when the military was clamping down on democracy? Where were their voices when June 12 was annulled? Where were their voices in the most critical period of Nigerian history? And I think that speaks to the first aspect, which is calling. I've been in politics for a long time. My motivation is to find a way of moving this nation forward. I've been doing it for a long time, for about the last 20 years, both as a student and political activist, and definitely as somebody that has been very active in the process of trying to move this nation forward. Now, to the second aspect of what I believe would make me an effective representative, there are over 80 specific things that the Constitution specifies are the duties of the National Assembly. The Constitution refers to them as an exclusive legislative list that has about 68 separate items. And then there's a concurrent list which the National Assembly shares with the states. Now, the things that the legislature are supposed to be responsible for include things like the state of the healthcare system, includes things like the quality of education, the educational system, includes issues such as infrastructure, power, commerce, the regulation of banking, the regulation of foreign transactions. I mean, these are all very, very complicated issues that can determine whether or not a country moves forward or remains stagnant. And I have, since I graduated from the University of Lagos, spent a great deal of time developing my capacity in these areas. I have worked with companies like McKinsey across the world. I mean, McKinsey is one of the foremost consulting firms in the world. I have lived in places where I've been responsible for some very important programs and projects that have prepared me both mentally and in terms of the capacity that I have for handling many of the things that we're challenged with in Nigeria. I mean, what are the things that the Nigerian legislature should be dealing with? We have a power issue, we have issues with infrastructure, we have issues with transactions and commerce, we have issues with unemployment, finding jobs for our youth. These are things which over time I have demonstrated significant competency in, and I believe Assembly we bring in a wealth of experiences that I've gained over the last 20 years, working both in Nigeria and overseas, bringing that experience with me to the National Assembly. And I believe that when I couple that to my political experience, that definitely would make me a very effective member of the National Assembly representing the FCT.
Dr. Fagi, I heard something that made me to wonder. You said the sacrifice, politics is a sacrifice. Oh, what is that? Is it animal or is it their time or what? And hey, you now say that politics is a calling. Who called you? Did the Lord flash you by any chance? Or what? I don't understand. I don't, it's meant to be placed. And
Chigel, you ask very good questions. So I'll clarify the things that I said.
Thank you.
Okay. I said when I got into politics, I got in at a time when being in politics was a sacrifice. And the sacrifice I was talking about was a sacrifice in time. Sometimes a sacrifice in the progress of your career. So for instance, many of us who were student activists got rusticated, got expelled from school, simply because of our political work. That I think is a major sacrifice. We didn't need to do it. Those who were not students, who were involved in politics at the time, I mentioned names like Ganifa Emi, names like Beko Ransom Kuti, names like Femi Falana. These were people who, many of them were jailed. Many of them spent months, sometimes years in jail. Some of them paid the ultimate sacrifice. So that's the sacrifice I'm talking about. And then when I say politics is a calling, what I mean is, you don't just wake up and say you want to become a politician simply because it seems lucrative and it seems attractive to be doing that now. I think if the child is going to be a musician, when that child is young, we would know. You give that child a spoon, the first thing that child will do is she will run to a mirror and act as if that spoon was a microphone. So we know it's a calling. So those of us who, people say our politicians have not been very effective. But over the last 12 years, there are perhaps two names that some people single out. People will single out Ahmed McAfee and talk about his tenure when he was governor in Kaduna State. Some other people would also talk about Donald Duke and talk about the work that he did in Cross River State. Now, guess what? I'm not surprised that they were effective, even though they were operating within a political climate in which many other people were not effective. And why am I not surprised? I'm not surprised because Ahmed McAfee, before he became governor, when he was in school, had actually been, I believe, the PRO of the Ahmadu Bello University Students Union. And people who were with him at the time in school tell me that the type of things that Ahmed did as governor were things that he was already displaying as a student and political activist and leader in his time. The same with Donald Duke. Donald was also a social secretary of the Ahmadu Bello University Students Union. So many of the things they did later in life were things they had started doing early on. So when I speak about calling, what I mean is that you don't just take up something as a career option. You actually have an affinity for it. You have a deep affinity for that particular thing that you want to do. That is what I refer to as a calling.
So this is politics of assumption, as you can see so far. It's not a big talk, you know. It's not simple because some people we are motivated from their claim, because of different politics. Oh my, it's a sad thing. Anyway, we shall move on. Another question. Over to you, my brother.
All right, Dr. Malcolm. We live in a country where a lot of people are impoverished, and we hear every day that these legislators are being paid large sums of money for doing nothing, and it seems that they are hardly ever in session because they're always traveling. Now my question to you, Dr. Malcolm, is this: do you agree that they are being paid too much for doing nothing? And what is supposed to be the duty of the legislator?